When you photograph people in color, you photograph their clothes. When you photograph people in black and white, you photograph their souls. This quote was made famous by photographer Ted Grant. An example of his picture can be seen here. White is the absence of all colors, while black is when all colors are present. Now, there is some dispute as to whether or not black and white photography is better than colored photography. Personally, I think it all comes down to opinion, but there are some logical reasons as to why one would be better than the other. Depending on the mood, you can tell that by editing pictures, sometimes color works a lot better than black and white for certain pictures. So what I'm going to do now is show you an example of a picture that would look better in color than it would in black and white. Now, because of the surroundings, it is easy to see why the emphasis would be put on color and why black and white wouldn't work in this particular situation. Now, black and white is perfect for when you get a colored photo that is a little overexposed or just doesn't look right. Now, when you mix the black and white on top of the colored photo, it typically erases those mistakes that you would normally see if that photo was in color, like this. I think as humans, we've come to rely on color quite a bit. So much so that when we view pictures, it's almost as if we are looking at the colors themselves rather than the subject. For this reason, I think black and white photography is a much better choice when you're trying to capture a person's inner being. It tends to have a more fluid look in terms of who they are inside rather than outside. Just like the quote I mentioned before, colors tend to focus on material items rather than the person themselves. On the opposing side of this argument, it is easy to see why choosing one color in a black and white photo can draw the viewer's attention to a certain aspect of the picture that the photographer is wanting the viewer to see. Although there is color in this photograph, the main aspect of the entire photograph is in black and white, which makes it more creative, and using that one color focal point allows the viewer to be drawn to one specific spot in the picture. Now, if this entire picture was in color, we probably wouldn't be focused on that one aspect as opposed to the entire picture and the colors within it. I really think that black and white draws more out of the viewer than color. It adds more feeling, and you are able to get the feeling of the person themselves within the picture rather than just looking at the colored objects in a picture frame. Aside from emphasis and creativity in black and white photography, it is also a known fact that black and white prints last longer than colored prints. In this aspect, black and white not only becomes a creative factor, but a preservation factor as well. And we all know that we take pictures for a good reason, typically because we want to capture a memory and keep it forever. There's no better way to keep a memory forever than having it last longer, which would be with black and white prints versus colored prints. Dr. Deborah Bowers from Colorado wrote an article about the psychological effects of color. In it, she states that the colors that we grew up with affect our minds in different ways. We typically use colors associated with memories. So let's say we know that an apple is red. So if we see the color red, we typically associate it with an apple. For this reason, I think black and white is a much better choice for photography, and I will tell you why. When we look at a colored photograph, we already associate colors with something in our mind. When we look at a black and white photograph, it's left to openness. Black is associated with mysteriousness, which will obviously get you thinking and want to be more inquisitive about the picture and who's in it. White is known to leave an open freedom effect on the mind, which means that you're open to suggestion and you're willing to look at something in a different aspect as if you would, rather than if the picture was in color. So if I'm looking at a black and white photograph, I'm going to be inquisitive and my mind is going to be open to suggestion in terms of what the image is telling me. Whereas if I look at a colored photograph, I'm already going to have made up in my mind what it is going to make me think. Both color and black and white have a place in photography. Which one you choose is up to you. But again, I highly suggest that you go with black and white in most cases. The reason for this is because it adds a classic, soulful look and has a mysterious, open-minded psychological effect on the human mind. When you take a black and white photograph, you're not only showing the viewer what you see, but you're allowing them to look within themselves to see the photo in a completely different way.